Good morning and welcome to our Sunday worship service. I'm Elizabeth Berlinger. I'll be your celebrant this morning. I love nature. Nature is extremely important to me. I walk on Moscow Mountain just about every morning, except Sunday, then I'm here. And I could say nature is my church, beside this one. And it gives me healing, and it keeps me healthy in body, mind, and spirit. I experience comfort, peace, rejuvenation, inspiration, contemplation, elation, and many other feelings when I walk in nature. I'd like to extend a special welcome to all those who are joining us for the first time. We are very glad you are here. If you've come in person, you should have received a welcome packet with an information card in it. If you fill that out and drop it in the offering basket, we will be in touch to support you in finding your way into our community. If you are joining us online, there's a link on the website to an electronic version of the same card. Our welcome committee members have yellow name tags and can answer any questions you might have. Whether you are new or not, please consider staying for coffee and conversation after the service downstairs or in the Zoom room. And now, let's say our words of welcome together. Whether this is your first or your 1000th Sunday with us, and whether you strolled, rolled, zoomed, ran, or danced in, we are glad you chose to join us. We are one people of many beliefs, identities, origins, sexualities, and genders. All are welcome here. Now we will take a moment to say hello across the technical divide. First, we're going to show the people joining us on Zoom. If you are at home, please turn on your camera. And now, people at home, wave. Now, people attending the service here in our building, it's your turn to wave. And now I invite those of you who are in the sanctuary to greet one another with a nod, a handshake, or a smile. And those of you on Zoom might type a greeting in the chat. That's something new.
There will be we do have one quick announcement. On the 15th of July, there is a pet memorial service at WSU that's going to be hosted and organized by Scott Campbell, who's an active member of our congregation. If you've experienced pet loss and feel like a ceremony of remembrance and celebration of their lives would be a useful thing for you, there are flyers and little square take-home things out on the greeting table. And there end the announcements.
We preface our service by acknowledging our church was built on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Chichunch, called the Coeur d'Alene. Let us pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. We are hoping that folks joining us from Zoom have a challenge or a candle to light. Did I say a chalice and a candle to light, and something to light it with. Let's light our chalices together. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and sing to share.
Thank you. Please be seated. We'll have to trade this back and forth and hope that there's not enough space on there to hold our germs. Good morning, everyone. I need a breath. So we know that time spent outdoors is good for us. There are plenty of scientific studies that prove it. Subjects who spend at least 120 minutes, that's about 2 hours outside each week, had improved respiratory health, fewer symptoms of depression, stronger immune symptoms, better vision, lower blood pressure, as well as lower levels of stress hormones and improved cognition. They slept better and reported a greater overall sense of well-being. And it didn't matter whether they went outside for 1 or 2 longer periods or just a short sojourn each day. Stepping out into a garden or a pocket park was just as effective as climbing to a mountaintop. Time outdoors is also good for our relationships. As the stress hormones come down and our breathing deepens, we're more able to connect with one another. In fact, marriage therapists often prescribe time spent outdoors for romantic couples who are struggling or just looking to improve their relationship. And research has also demonstrated that time spent in nature strengthens the parent-child bond, improves parent-child communication, and correlates with better parenting skills. In other words, we're better humans when we put down the devices and look up at the sky once in a while. This world we live in is such a miraculous place, and we are not separate from it, but interdependent with it, part of the interdependent web of all life. So today we're going to imagine ourselves gathering together in the Church of the Big Blue Dome. And let's start by rising in body or in spirit to sing hymn number 163, For the Earth Forever Churning.
For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful praise to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, returning home to our blue-green hills of earth.
Now, let's take a moment to engage in the practice of generosity together. For those of you able to make a financial contribution, the logistics are on your screen. We typically give away all of our cash from our Sunday offering to local charities whose missions align with our values. A program called the Month of Sunday. This month, the recipient is Planned Parenthood. And to donate, please indicate Month of Sunday on your check or from the online drop-down menu. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we will now take some time to practice generosity together.
The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still within or leaves thy sight, and I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. The ends of earth are in thy hand, the seas dark, deep, and far off land, and I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me.
This morning, I'd like to light our candle of broader concern for all those impacted by the rash of mass shootings that took place over the 4th of July holiday weekend in Shreveport, Louisiana, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, Maryland, Fort Worth, Texas, and more. All told, 15 people died and 50 more were injured over the weekend, including a 7-year-old in Tampa, Florida, who died after being shot and whose grandfather was also shot trying to shield the child with his own body. According to the New York Times, this is not unusual for the weekend of the 4th. Patriotism, love of country, has been so corrupted by our nation's addiction to guns that it's hardly recognizable sometimes. And sweaty, booze-soaked barbecues don't always bring out the best in people. So, in the face of our nation's epidemic of gun violence, may we channel our rage and despair into meaningful action. In the face of tragedy and disaster, may we affirm the sacredness of life. And in the face of violence, may we recommit to the work of creating peace. Will you breathe with me? Breathe into the anger, the pain, and the sorrow. Breathe out love. Breathe out peace. And now I'll invite Rodney Fry, a member of our pastoral care team, forward to lead the lighting of candles of joy and sorrow.
Good morning. Now is the time in our service as members and friends of this congregation where we lift up our joys and sorrows. The sharing of joys and sorrows is a sacred ritual in our community, a time to briefly acknowledge truly significant life events. As we have sung together in the past, joys and sorrows make us wise, kin to all that lives and dies. There are 3 options for sharing. You can send your joys and sorrows that you may have to Ryan Early, and we'll incorporate them in a slideshow the following week. Read them aloud and light a candle for you. You can share here in person and light a candle. Or if you're on the Zoom, you can put a message in chat, and Alex will pick it up and we'll read it aloud for you and light a candle. So go ahead and get comfortable. Take a few deep breaths and check in with your heart.
you. I invite you now into a time of guided meditation. So please begin by making yourself comfortable. Perhaps close your eyes, perhaps uncross your legs. Let your body relax and your breath deepen into your belly. Imagine with me, if you will, that we are no longer indoors inside our beloved building or staring at a computer screen, but rather somewhere outside that is special to you, a place that is real or imagined, a place where you feel safe and supported and a part of all that is. No walls, no ceiling, just the sky above you and the natural world all around. I invite you to envision taking off your shoes, for you are on holy ground. Feel the earth under your feet. Is it soft and loamy? Prickly with pine needles or sticks? Is it sandy? Is it hard or rough? Feel the air on your skin. Is it hot or cold? Humid or dry? Is there a breeze? Are there plants tickling you or rough bark beneath your touch? As you gaze around this outdoor sanctuary with your mind's eye, what do you see? What shapes or colors? What textures are there? Where do you see movement and where stillness? What do you smell? Is the air green and moist, dry and dusty? Can you detect a hint of decay? Or perhaps the sweetness of new growth? What sounds do you hear? Wind through the trees, water running, waves crashing or lapping gently against the shore? Birds calling, or just your own breath in and out? And then dive deeper and listen below the breath. What is the world whispering to you here in your special place, surrounded by such beauty? Perhaps it urges you to slow down, to go easy, to be gentle with yourself. Perhaps it murmurs of impermanence, joy, the wonder available in the present moment. Perhaps it sings to you of acceptance, of peace. Whatever it whispers, believe it. Let this wisdom take root in your heart even as you slowly and gently begin to come back to the actual place in which you sit. You might roll your head on your neck or wiggle your fingers and toes. And then when you're ready, take one last deep breath and open your eyes. Thank you. A recent article by Stacy Colino in National Geographic touted the benefits of spending time in green spaces, parks, gardens, woods, forests, mountains, etc., as well as blue spaces, places near oceans, rivers, streams, lakes. The colors, blue and green, are soothing to us, the author asserts, as are, I found this very interesting, the fractal shapes, like pine cones, ferns, waves. And like many others, she catalogs the physiological, cognitive, and emotional shifts that have been documented by researchers who study humans in the wild. You guys didn't get the joke. All right. She writes, spending time in nature can elicit what's called soft fascination, an unthreatening, pleasant experience that's interesting but doesn't require your full attention. This way, your mind can wander and you can think about things at the same time. When people are in nature, they tend to think about topics related to spirituality and their life journey. So I invited a couple of people to share their thoughts on the importance of spending time in nature. Actually, knowing we're in the midst of prime hiking and backpacking and floating season, I asked more than a few people and cast a pretty wide net. And Karen and Mac were both in town rather than out practicing what we're preaching today. So they're the ones who will share their testimonials. Karen, may I invite you up first?
So I'm Karen Jennings, and Michael and I have been coming to this church, I think since 1995, when our daughter Molly was born. And we had the great fortune of having Molly grow up in this church. As Max said, like their daughter, that Molly benefited a lot from being in this church. So I inherited a deep connection to nature from my father, who took me and my family hiking, camping, and skiing. So being in nature was a really great opportunity to spend meaningful time with a father who was often reserved and lacked confidence in interacting with his kids. So my father, Jack Lucas, was born in 1917 at the foothills of the North Cascades in Concrete, Washington. Later, he lived with his parents in Bellingham in Seattle. So spending time in nature was not a big priority for his parents. However, because my father was an only child, they encouraged him to join Boy Scouts, where he grew to love camping, hiking, climbing, and skiing in the Cascades and Olympics. This bright, often lonely boy found balance, inspiration, and companionship with others in nature, which really made a big difference in his life. So, this love he passed on to us. We had no choice. That's what we did as a family. I'm the youngest there. You can, and I was dragged along. We even had a couple of rooms in our garage devoted to outdoor gear. I also joined Girl Scouts, where I could enjoy hiking and camping with others my age. When I was in high school and college, I could go hiking, backpacking, and skiing with friends independently, which was really great. You didn't let rain stop you in the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in the Seattle area, and I remember a particularly rainy trip, it's not raining in that picture, when we sheltered under tarps and huddled together away from the dripping edges. We still talk about that. As I have made my way through life, spending time in nature has proved vital for me and something I share deeply with Michael. It has been my refuge, giving me perspective, adventure, peace, exercise, and beauty. It has helped to get to know a place while traveling and build community wherever we have lived, and creating friendship with many wonderful people. Okay, so my father's inheritance has been passed on to our daughter Molly, who I think at times must be my dad reincarnated. They never met, but she was born a year after, maybe a couple years after he died. So she has a love of nature and spending time on the rivers and in the woods and mountains. So when Michael held Molly for the first time, it was after being awake for 34 hours and a little delirious, but I looked over and he was welcoming her to our family and proceeded to list off all the activities that she would do and all the equipment that went along with it. I still remember that. She just stared at him, of course. But he must have cast a wonderful spell on her because she, like my father and me, finds great solace and fulfillment in nature. She's also an only child, like my dad, and it was a vital pathway for her, too, to meet others, especially in college, where she developed outdoor leadership skills, and then after college with her partner, Ethan. Their weekends are filled with outdoor activities. They live in Wenatchee, and that's just a mecca for outdoor stuff. They're often with friends. She now backpacks with her cousin Laura, who is much older. She's 45 years old, but they share this extremely rich inheritance from their grandfather. So this past year in our church, it has been so meaningful for me to see the launching of the Navigators program by Ryan and Ginger, as they also facilitate this incredible connection to nature within families, who can then in turn pass on this rich and often life-saving intergenerational tradition. Thank you.
So I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of mine and Janice's experiences when our kids were growing up, and a little about my experiences when I was a kid. And I think this is all about us primates who have been spending huge amounts of time interacting with the natural world, and we've been affected by it for so long. We've been moving around in the great outdoors, and throughout that time, I think about how all of these tiny primates have been carried by the other primates, even before we were humans. Carried along, used to being moving with the tribe. When the tribe was moving, it was time to just sit back and be held or be carried and look at the world going along, to look at the sky, to look at the trees moving by, and maybe to fall asleep. And I think that's really deep in it, being involved in that jostling rhythm. We've been co-evolving for a tremendous amount of time. And I think it affected our kids when they were really young. When they were tiny, one of the things that had calmed them was just carrying them around. If we stuck Danny and Paul inside a pack or in a pouch and started walking around outside, they'd settle down. And pretty soon they would be looking around, and then they'd often be asleep like that. Not always, sometimes it took longer. But it seems to affect them really at a really young age. I remember one winter afternoon when Paul was really, really fussy. And I wanted to get outside. He was really fussy. I was taking care of him. I drove him out to Kamiak Butte and stuck him in a pack. It was in the middle of the winter. And we started walking, and it was just clear, crystalline air and cold snow. And he stopped fussing after a little while. And then he was completely a snooze for the rest of this long walk at really cold temperatures in this beautiful environment. And it was pretty blessed silence for me. When they were older, if we went someplace that had grass, leaves, rocks, if it had sticks, then they'd eventually start building little elf houses and start making up stories themselves. And it didn't matter where it was. Sometimes it'd be at Upper Priest Lake, we'd go canoeing up there. Sometimes Moscow Mountain. Sometimes it would be in the back of our yard. And it was fine if they dug little holes in the grass and built things. They were interacting with each other in that world. And it was part of what opened them up, I think, to the basic fact that they were primates in a natural world that they were free to move around in. And I think that is something that we're all deeply involved with, and we're all made for that. Thinking about myself, I remember the freedom when I was a kid of being in the outside world. I grew up in southern Illinois in a county called Clay County for a really good reason. It could have been called Clay and Mud County. But there were wonderful small farms and small farm ponds. You could see the bottom where it was about that deep. And we had wonderful times in them. We'd often go into an area that we called the Weeds. It was just there's some vacant lots on the east edge of this small town that I grew up in. And there were enough trees going into it that it was turning back into a small forest. And we'd sometimes have gangs out there of our friends building forts, digging holes, climbing the trees. We'd climb maple trees and swing them back and forth. And we'd catch ants, put them in anthuriums. Nature taught us a lot about the real world and about each other there. I'd sometimes go out in those woods and just sit for long periods of time, even when I was a little kid, just watching and listening and smelling what was out there. And that just beautiful place to me, just being a small part of it. When I was 18, we expanded our territory, and my brother Gary and some friends and I decided we'd go canoeing in the Ozarks in southern Missouri on a river called the Current River. We'd never been over in that area. We drove over there at night, and when we arrived there, we were going to be canoeing the next day. We heard running water when we got out of the car, and it was from an enormous spring that was near there. We grabbed our flashlights and went running down to where this was, and we were suddenly standing next to these crystal clear waters of this spring, shining our flashlights down into them with trout, enormous trout moving through the vegetation in these waters. And we were completely transformed by that. And I think it affected all 6 of us guys for the rest of our lives. And we got to spend the next 3 days traveling through that amazing world. I think that is part of what also made this whole group of us what we became. I still feel like I'm transformed in really small ways sometimes in large ways when I go outside. And it might be backcountry skiing in the Wallowas, it might be on Moscow Mountain, it might just be in our own yard myself. And when I'm there, it can really turn my worst moods and my depression into a feeling of really being in the present. Janice will attest to the fact that my moods go like this, and sometimes I'm really down, and one of the things that can really pull me out is just being outside and being connected. And then it can turn me into a calm, fulfilled part of the wholeness that's all around me. So I hope each of you can spend more time outside. And if you want to know places to go on Moscow Mountain, just let me know. If you want me to show you those places, I'd be glad to, because it's a great place. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen, and thank you, Mac. One word of warning: if you go out with Mac, wear long pants, because he likes to bushwhack. So I'm a nature lover too, and when I'm next to or on top of a lake or a river and the light hits the water and the breeze ripples the surface, my brain liquefies and dribbles out my ears. I mean, not really, but my anxiety just melts away. My monkey mind quiets, and I come into a place of stillness and acceptance and peace and lightness and joy. I'm able to be fully present in ways that I can't always manage in my everyday life. I've spent entire days, and those of you who know me know, I'm not somebody who sits still for very long very well, but I have spent entire days sitting, just watching the water, not thinking, not doing, just being. And it may be because my grandmother's lake cottage was an oasis of peace in an often turbulent and traumatic childhood, or it could be because as my grandfather was dying, the first major loss I experienced in life, my refuge was a lake shore where there was a mother loon and her babies who would float along, the babies on the back in the wee hours of the morning with the mist rising from the water. It may just be that my animal body responds to blue space the same way it responds to a really good massage. But lake time beside still waters, really does restore my soul. I also make a pilgrimage to the ocean at least once a year. I do this because once I went 2.5 years without seeing the ocean, and when I finally got over to Claylock Beach and looked out and saw the horizon that was limitless and blue, I felt such an overwhelming sense of relief and joy and deep sadness that it just broke me apart. If lakes give me deep peace, the ocean offers perspective, a sense of the infinite, a tangible connection to mystery. Somehow, standing at the shore with nothing but sea before me, I feel simultaneously small in the face of the vastness and inextricably connected to all that is. My green space time these days I spend mostly up on Moscow Mountain. I get up there almost every day. My mountain time keeps me sane and resilient. I think through problems, I chew on dilemmas, I give myself the space to feel whatever I need to as I hike along. My creative juices flow way more freely when I'm up in the woods. Many a homily has been written in my head as I walked on dusty Moscow Mountain trails. The trees, they help me metabolize trauma and suffering. I lean on them, especially cedars, and I imagine them breathing in my suffering in the form of carbon dioxide and breathing out love and peace as fresh, clean oxygen, a sort of arboreal Tonglen practice. I find a lot of dead things in the woods. Could just be because I have dogs. But I really appreciate the regular reminder that life is a transitory phenomenon, and that death and decay are as much a part of the cycle of existence as birth and growth. My colleague Meg Barnhouse writes in a piece called The Green After, at a camping weekend with friends, we were nestled in a clearing on a mountainside. Most of the folks were around the campfire talking or dozing. Our chef was in the cooking tent, grilling and gossiping with his fiancée and a couple of others. He wasn't wearing his high heels that day. He does sometimes, but only on camping weekends. I love those people, and they love me. Being surrounded by love is one fine way to spend time. I wandered off to the hammock and lay there looking up at the sky through early April leaves. I was soaked with light, the blue of the sky, the green of young leaves, the sun shining through them like stained glass. I thought, when I die, I want to have my ashes buried under this tree so that for one spring after another, my body can be a part of this particular green. I could feel my life flowing through the cells of a leaf, feel the leaf opening to the warmth and the light, feel myself part of that green, and I was happy. If that is my afterlife, I will be deeply happy. That's the end of that reading. So for me, I want my ashes tossed in the abyss at the Grand Canyon. Partially because I want to make sure my boys go someplace together where awe might just open the cracks to their hearts and help them feel whatever grief or relief they feel around losing their mother. And in part because I love thinking in geologic time and the idea of my atoms coexisting and merging with stone put in place billions of years ago appeals to me tremendously. But I understand what Meg is saying. The light through the trees, that particular gold-limbed green, feels like the closest thing to a visual manifestation of God I've ever experienced. Now, I don't just find reminders of mortality up on the mountain. I find wild strawberries and huckleberries and morels. I see turkeys, deer, more birds than I can count, the occasional moose. Actually, I'm going to tell you a funny story real quick. This isn't in the script, but so the first time I was up on Moscow Mountain and I bumped into a moose, this is probably my first year here, I actually called Mac and I said, "Mac, there's a moose, what do I do?" And he said, "Make a lot of noise, and if it runs at you, get behind a tree." So I kept the dogs really close, and I sang moose songs, saying, "Just leave me alone, Mr. Moose, we're all going to be fine." And everything was fine, and it didn't charge. But anyway, they're huge. They're so big. Oh, boy. So I do see the occasional moose. I love bending close to the wildflowers, and every year I learn just a few more names of the flowers. Time on the mountain reminds me that we humans are not the end point of evolution, but merely one of millions of unique species, each evolved to perfectly fit and fill a particular niche in a complex ecosystem in a particular moment of time, each continuing to evolve. Now, I know that thanks to Aristotle and a whole bunch of other dead white guys, there exists in certain circles and in our collective culture a myth called the Great Chain of Being that superimposes a hierarchy on the natural world. Green time, time in the outdoors, counteracts that powerfully and to good effect. Embracing our status as part of a diverse web rather than clinging to a precarious and untrue perch at the top of a pyramid, it doesn't feel like a demotion to me. Rather, it's a relief. There is so much evidence that life persists, that it adapts, that it evolves. It helps me to think that if we humans can't get our act together in time to prevent mass extinction, including possibly our own, somehow life will still find a way. In the words of Mary Oliver from her poem Wild Geese, "Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things." The world is calling to you, and I hope you're able to find time and safe ways to answer whether you want to summit a 14er or just pause and watch a squirrel for a moment. Fact is, on beautiful days like this, sometimes I come to church and I look out at all of you and I'm like, what are you doing here? The world is calling to you. Nature's truth erodes all sorts of toxic lies that culture has tried to implant in us. It brings us back to our best selves. It shows us the way home. So be it, and so may it be. I invite you to rise now in body or spirit. Let's sing number 1064, Blue Boat Home. Nope. Below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my driving heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port have I known. Wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat Sun my sail and moon my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, grieve the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat. Please be seated. In the hours before the birds stream airborne with chiming voices, a silent breath rests in the pines and upholds the surface of the lake as if it were a fragile bubble in the very hand of God. And I think this is how we are called, to cup our hands and hold this peace, even when the sirens begin, even when sorrow cries out old and gnarled, even when words grow fangs and rend, cupped hands, gently open, supporting peace like the golden hollow of a singing bowl, like the towering rim of mountains cradling this slumbering and mist-draped valley. Let's join in our musical benediction, There is a Love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding on. Please join me in the words to extinguish our chalice. Together again. Beloveds, I know that this morning's worship was preaching to the choir. I doubt there are many people here who don't get out into blue space, into green space, and reap the benefits that are waiting for you. Nevertheless, I hope you take this as both a reminder and as permission and encouragement to just go and listen to the call and heed it and trust it and lean into the resilience of life. Go in peace. Come back next Sunday.